Joining me, I'm pleased he's back, my Friday regular, former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Good to see you again, Campbell. Welcome. Let's just stick with Tony Burke's shameless use of citizenship ceremonies to try and corral more Labor votes. It's cynical politics, but considering in some of these electorates it could come down to a few hundred votes, could this actually work in Labor's favour?
Well, Steve, great to be back with you. And as a former local government official, the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, I've done a lot of citizenship ceremonies in my time. I think it really could make the difference in critical electorates. And I think when we dissect this, we've first got to ask, has there been any sort of selection of locations or people who come from locations to sort of get through the queue? That'd be an interesting question to ask of the AEC or indeed the Minister's office, not that he'd tell us. I'll make another observation as well. This has been traditionally delegated to local government. So what I'm saying there is normally these ceremonies are undertaken by local councils and the mayor of the local area presides. That's why I've done an awful lot of them. And I'm not saying that the Minister hasn't come and done them before, but that was the rule, and the exception was one when a minister would be doing it. So the idea that the actual minister is traipsing around Australia so close to an election, a critically close election, and undertaking the MC sort of role or the presiding officer role is really, really off. It doesn't satisfy the pub test. And I can tell you now, under some provisions of the law in Queensland, if he was a Queensland official, I certainly be combing through the Queensland Criminal Code to see if it was somehow a misuse of office. The Queensland Criminal Code's a very powerful piece of legislation, so is the Crime and Corruption Commission Act in this state. Now, I'm not saying he's breached any law. I'm being very careful about that, but I'm saying that this looks like a misuse of his office for political purposes. And one other observation as well. Look, it's quite normal for the AEC to be there at those ceremonies. But the minister using it as a platform instead of letting the local mayors run it, that's really suspicious.
Yeah, and he's on his way to Brisbane and then to Toowoomba, so you'll be able to see it up close. Let's talk about Jim Chalmers. He's a Queenslander. You've known him a long time. He obviously worked for Kevin Rudd and then he is now the nation's treasurer. It looks like some of the incumbent Labor MPs, those in marginal seats, they're getting a bit nervous about how the Prime Minister is going out on the fake campaign trail. And so they're asking Treasurer Jim to turn up. He's been called to campaign into marginal seats. He was in yesterday, I think, in the Hunter Valley. Do you think the Treasurer might be able to have more success convincing locals to vote Labor than perhaps PM Albanese, who's having a rough trot?
Well, I'm certainly not a fan. It wouldn't convince me, mate, because I think our Treasurer is the rolled gold BS artist of the federal parliament with that cheesy smile. And frankly, he's skated through the last 3 years without really hard questioning. If I turned up like Peter Credlin used to Daniel Andrews' press conferences, if I turned up as a journalist, I would certainly expose him to some questions he wouldn't be able to answer because he is 1 inch deep and 5 miles wide, Jim Chalmers. But I will say this, that he's obviously got a higher level of personal popularity and appeal than the Prime Minister, who now with a net favourability rating of -21, that is toxic territory, that is deeply unpopular. People have worked out, I'm afraid, the PM, and they just don't believe him or trust him or even want to listen to him anymore. So I suppose they've got to try that. But I find it extraordinary that Chalmers has just been to the United States, speaking to the American sort of Treasury Secretary, etc. And I mean, you know, if I'd been a fly on the wall or sitting there on the corner couch, I've been going, I'd be saying to the Americans, do you know these guys? Do you know this bloke? You know, he's absolutely, totally against everything you stand for. He doesn't understand what makes business tick. He's brought in or been involved in a cabinet that's brought in terrible IR laws, cranked up the price of electricity, increased the red tape and green tape on Australian businesses. He is your absolute class enemy. And everything you're going to do in the United States is going to show up his flawed policies over the next few years. Australia will go backwards. Meanwhile, the United States is going to go forward in leaps and bounds with lower taxes and less regulation and abandoning this net zero rubbish.
Yeah, it's a great point you make, and he's everything Donald Trump hates. Just quickly before you go, I can't let you go without talking 2032 Olympics. And Gold Coast says, hey, we'd like some of the swimming. Brisbane says, hey, you're not getting any of the Olympic Games. What's going on here? Is this a genuine fight between the two locations to have the swimming?
I'd say so. But look, I'm just sick of the me in this country these days, Steve. Look, we've got really significant pressures on the federal budget. The NDIS is out of control. Chinese warships cruising down the Australian coast means that we do have to increase defence spending significantly. And meantime, we've got people squabbling over who's getting money for the Olympics. Well, I say if the Gold Coast can utilise the great facilities built for the Com Games and save a bucket load of money, good luck to them. And frankly, we should be looking at the Games through a prism, which is how do we save as much money as possible and put on respectable games. And I say no to expenditure on new stadiums and new infrastructure. Look, the world has changed in the last 4 or 5 months. We really have to get real that the great days of the 90s and the 2000s are behind us. We have to actually get real about balancing budgets and spending money on the right priorities. And, more money on stadiums. I'm sorry to the sporting codes. You need to sort of pull it in a bit as well. Everyone's going to have to do their bit because, tough times are coming, actually.
Yeah, good point, good point, Campbell. Thank you very much for that. Interestingly, I note today that the organising committee has stuck Greg Norman on the committee. I think Greg knows more about spending money than saving